Hare Krishna.
Ei, agitação!
Can you see me?
What's that?
Hare Krishna. This is the. Can you see everyone there? Not yet.
Let's see.
But
Yeah, there.
This is the undercover. The what do you call it? The down undercover Krishna West. It's a Krishna down undercover crew. That's what it is.
Hare Krishna.
You got Mani Banda here is in charge of the guest house here. You got Malcolm here is teaching yoga down in the Krishna village. You got Bhakta Jeev, who joined us not long ago. This is Leela, Malcolm's wife, who's in charge of yoga and teaching yoga. This is Henrika, who's in charge of the Krishna village.
Oh, Henrika, Henrika wrote to me, I think.
Well, yes, and I got an answer from you. I almost fell off my chair.
Actually, look, she's right.
Yes, and that's why I'm on this now.
And then there's Krishna Gan there, who's cooking the burgers and chips.
Krishna the Gun.
And then there is Her Grace, Sri Hari Bhakti.
Hey, Sri Hari Bhakti.
There's Amba,
Hare Krishna.
Leonardo's wife.
Buenas tardes, Maharaj.
¿Qué tal? ¿Qué
Leonardo
hubo?
was there before.
Hare Krishna.
There's Sri Padma.
Oh yeah, I'd know her anywhere.
Hare Krishna.
Even Hare Krishna.
So there's everyone.
Pretty's here too.
Driti, yeah. So Driti. Driti is there. Kalindi is somewhere at the back. Oh,
Driti?
Driti Gopi.
Oh.
She's my disciple.
Hare Krishna.
So I'll turn the volume up. Can you see everyone there?
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. It's really nice to see everyone. So, do you guys have any questions or an offer I can't refuse or?
Well, actually, in the Krishna village, they were because they're teaching 6-week courses of yoga, and they were using your Patanjali verses in your Bhagavad Gita. So they need some teachers for Patanjali. So they figured if you want to come and teach it, would be good also.
Sure.
6-week courses.
I'll teach.
Do we need to offer to persuade you?
Henrika is asking, what's the offer to persuade you to come and
Yeah,
teach
it's like you gotta do what the Godfather did. Make an offer I can't refuse.
Yeah, what's the offer? You tell us. Say what you want.
It's the usual free lunch and.
We'll do that. We'll set the kitchen up so you enjoy it. So when exactly were you coming?
Ich weiß es nicht. Actually, yeah, I hope to come fairly soon because, there's one book I want to finish. It's a novel I've been working on for so many years that I'm embarrassed to tell you how many. But I think it's coming out really well. You know, it's interesting, just one point I could bring up. Prabhupada once used the expression cultural conquest. And, of course, some devotees think it means just importing culture from South Asia. But actually, every cultural expression, whether it's in visual arts or music, literature, and so on, expresses the reality of just what it's like to be alive at a certain time in history. And, you know, we know that Krishna is everywhere and Krishna is in everything. And so at any particular historical moment, if one is gifted, one can find the absolute truth. And that's how, let's say, a historically based or historically specific cultural expression can achieve a universal appeal. I just give one example of Bhakti Johann Sebastian Bach. And yes, unsere Leute. so Bach was obviously his music very much reflects the first part of the 18th century in Lutheran Germany. And anyway, I won't go into all the historical conditions in Germany at that time, but still, his music very much reflects that. And all of you heard of Sir Isaac Newton, right? He was one of the original English woofers. Yeah, he was an English woofer, Sir Isaac Newton. And but he, I mean, the fact that he discovered how the universe is ultimately rational, the way I put it is that before Newton, people in Europe really, in their own minds, lived in Middle Earth. And I mean, there were trolls under bridges, and there were fairies, and there were elves. I mean, they really lived in a world like that. And then Newton showed that actually the world is mathematically rational, and therefore indicates that it was created by a completely rational deity. And so Bach himself, if you look at, when I was at Harvard, the dean of our graduate school was Christoph Wolff, which obviously he was Mexican. No, he was German, and he was actually a music professor. And he focused on Bach. And when I was at Harvard, he published this famous book on the life of Bach. And he actually concluded that in his music, Bach was doing his part to prove the existence of God. And just as Newton also wanted to show that we are ruled by a supreme rational being. And so because of it's hard to imagine how revolutionary it was in the Western world when Newton published his work, or from the European side, Leibniz. But anyway, so it really revolutionized everything. And then, so Bach was trying to show mathematically, almost like prove God's existence. And so in so many ways, you can understand Bach as situated in a specific historical period. But at the same time, Bach, as a great artist, he discovered within his historical period universal truths about the universe, about God. And that's why his music appeals basically to every sane person that knows anything about music, really all over the world. And so if you look at, for example, so if you look at Indian culture, even if you look at, so the question really, I mean, how should I put it? Let me start by saying this. Those of us who are trying to be Krishna conscious in the Western world, whether it's Australia or California or whatever, we have a unique experience. So what it feels like, the experience of trying to be a devotee, trying to be Krishna conscious, let's say in Northeast Australia, New Govardhana, or in Los Angeles, or New York, or in London, or whatever, trying to be Krishna conscious. On the one hand, we are practicing and experiencing universal principles. Krishna is God everywhere at all time. And the experience of chanting Krishna's name, the joy of associating with other sane devotees, and so on, and of course ultimately probably our central spiritual activity, overeating. But it's just kidding. So like the experience of trying to be a devotee, it's universal. So it's the same today, let's say in Australia, as it was in Vrindavan or West Bengal 500 years ago. But at the same time, in some ways, it's different. And it's funny, so that even to go back to Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, even though he's so much appreciated by those who appreciate the greatest music, he doesn't sell as many records as Taylor Swift, actually, which is sort of a tragic reality of our world. But so what I see is that, or take, for example, take the writings of Rupa Goswami and comparing that to Bach just in structural terms. I mean, Rupa Goswami is really doing two things. Number one, powerfully presenting universal truth about, I mean, the highest truth about Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, about the process of bhakti yoga, about Krishna's most intimate devotees, Radharani, and so on. So he's presenting these universal truths that are true everywhere at all times. And yet, the cultural vehicle that he chose, literary composition. Of course, he also wrote a powerful theology work, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. But if you look at his, let's say, like the Vidagdha Madhava, Lalita Madhava, these very literary works, they absolutely reflect the cultural reality that he operated in. So that, for example, first of all, his Sanskrit composition. If you look at what's called the lexicon, if you look at his vocabulary, the kinds of Sanskrit words he uses, if you look at what is called in grammar my brain is going good. That's the syntax. Syntax just means how you put words together, what order. So, for example, long poetic compounds. It absolutely reflects the kind of Sanskrit that was very popular among culturally sophisticated people at his time. And even, for example, the fact that there's little vignettes, like you have short little episodes and scenes and stories. I mean, anyway, if you look at Rupa Goswami and his works, just to give an example, he on the one hand, he's very much historically situated in a specific cultural reality. And at the same time, he's universal because he's revealing the absolute truth from a fully realized position. And so what's interesting is that in our time, like here we are, in let's say those of us who are working in the West, and so the question is, if you take that cultural package that Rupa Goswami uses, or that even if you look at the Bhagavatam, for example, its composition, I mean, it's very powerful, absolute truth, and yet it's written in a specific language. It has certain types of story, I mean, structure to the stories. So to what extent do people nowadays, to what extent are they comfortable with that cultural vehicle within which there is pure absolute truth? And what we know is that, I mean, I realize that in all of the Hare Krishna temples in the West, that intelligent, respectful people are literally lining up. You know, there's a waiting list to get into the Hare Krishna movement. Or not, or maybe not, but. So, it's, even Prabhupada said, like, for example, Sanatana Goswami, his Hari Bhakti Vilas, that is, it was written, he said there were 3 conditions on it. It was written for Indians. First thing, this is Prabhupada, don't kill the messenger. Prabhupada said it was written for people in India, and number 2, written for householders in India, and number 3, for a particular time in history. So, if the cultural package does not work for people in our age, if it's not the kind of storytelling that they're attracted to, then even though, like the Chewy, center, even though the absolute truth is there, people will not take the package. So, so I see our responsibility, and this is what Vaishnavas have done forever, if you study history, is that they take that absolute truth, that pure knowledge coming from great souls, and they just put it in a package that people will buy. For example, Hollywood. If you look at Hollywood movies, they're very formulaic, which means that they're told according to certain formulas. Like, and I mean, to give an example, George Lucas. George Lucas, before he made a movie, he studied Joseph Campbell. He studied with Joseph Campbell, who had come up with this idea that if you look at the great stories, whether it's, and he gave this example, like, whether it's like Mahabharata or the Iliad and the Odyssey, or maybe certain Bible stories, if you look at the great stories that have had the most narrative power, that have most really captured people's attention throughout history, you can actually discover in these stories a common way to tell the story, which he called the hero's journey. It's sort of a 12-step hero's journey. And for example, the first step, just to go over the first few steps, the first step is the status quo. Anyway, I'll go over it, but he took this formula and made a movie following strictly this formula, and that's Star Wars. And you see the result. So the first stage in the hero's journey is the status quo. I mean, think Luke Skywalker stuck on some incredibly boring planet where nothing happened and he's stuck with his aunt and uncle who, he loves. There is all the family has left, but they're like about as exciting for him as, sort of, you could say, as watching grass grow, as they say, or watching paint dry. So he's stuck on this really boring planet. So that's the status quo. The story starts, it's just something, that's the way things are now. And then there's a call. Like someone tells this person, you've got to do some amazing thing. Like Luke Skywalker, he's told, actually, you're meant to be a Jedi Knight. He says, well, thanks, but no thanks. I can't really do that. I just, buy and sell junk here on this very boring planet. Or think of Arjuna. So there's a call, and then the hero refuses the call and says, thanks, I can't do it. I mean, think of Arjuna. Krishna calls him to fight. I can't do it. So so then after refusing the call, then the person, the future hero, meets a guru or meets a mentor. Of course, Arjuna heard from Krishna. And then somehow the guru or the mentor convinces this future hero that you really have to do it. And then you start out on the journey. Then all kinds of things happen in the test. So what I mean to say is that kind of story works today. And so if you look at Hollywood movies, they follow formulas. Like the movie, there's like just a few ways that a movie can begin, then certain things have to happen, and this kind of person has to enter the story, and that person, and that's how they do it. They have rules of the game. So every culture, every century, every place in history has its own preferences, like the kind of stories they like. And so if you look at the Mahabharata, and by that I mean not just, the real essence of it, which is that God came to this world. The Supreme Lord actually came to this world and saved it. That's the story. But the way the story is told. So if you look at the Mahabharata, which, by the way, in terms of the style of narration, is very much like the Iliad and the Odyssey. And, hey, Your Grace, I'm actually doing a Skype call with Australia. Could I call you back? Oh, thank you very much, Mike. I want to talk to you. I'll call you back, okay? Thanks. That's from a cheer thing. So to make a long story short, that kind of narration, the Iliad and the Odyssey, or the Mahabharata, that kind of story where the heroes tend to embody a single very powerful virtue, or the villains embody a single vice, or you have characters in conflict where there's one virtue and one vice, whether it's like Achilles or Arjuna in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and so on. It's, there was a certain time in the world when that style of narration really thrilled people, and in a sense still does in India. But if you ask the question, why hasn't the Mahabharata become a big hit outside of India, or outside of people who kind of are somehow immersed in Indian culture, whether they're diaspora Hindus or Hare Krishnas, whatever. I mean, outside this little group, and then of course, what was that guy's name? Peter Brooks. He did this theatrical version, which is probably should win an award for the worst casting in the history of Western theater. But anyway, it just hasn't worked. It hasn't, to use the Hollywood term, it hasn't crossed over. Crossed over means in the entertainment industry, it's like, let's say someone is a Latino singer, they sing in Spanish, but then they cross over and they appeal to an English-speaking white audience in America, for example. And so that's crossing over from one market into a bigger market, or just another market. And so the Mahabharata has never crossed over. And this is actually a serious problem, because the Mahabharata is really the people's book. It's the book for the people. If you look at Bhagavatam, the Bhagavatam itself tells us many times that it's meant for the most advanced people. It's meant for the devotees. The devotees will relish it. It's a highly theological work. I mean, whether it's men or women, whether it's the ladies of Hastinapur on the roofs of their houses or whatever, everyone in Mahabharata, everyone in the Bhagavatam kind of speaks very sophisticated theology. And you actually don't have long stories. Like, for example, you take the Dhruva story, which I worked on. If you just take out all the theology, which is, for example, let's say first Dhruva's mother preaching to him when he's upset by his father's rejection, or then Narada preaching to Dhruva, and then when Dhruva finally sees Krishna, Dhruva offering prayers to Krishna, Krishna responding. There's all these theological moments in the Dhruva story. And if you take those out and just string together the actual narration, it's very short. I know, because I worked on it and I was thinking like, oh really, is that all? Of course, when you have like the word-by-word synonyms and the translation and purport of every verse, it gets thicker, there's more there. But if you just look at the story, say of Dhruva, which is a crucial story. Rupa Goswami refers to it a lot in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. The Dhruva story is one of the key stories which teaches a central theological point, which is that one should approach God with devotion, not for some material thing. And so, but the Dhruva story itself in the Bhagavatam is actually probably the whole story fits on a page, or a page and a half, at most 2 pages. Which, if you think about a modern novel, it's not an extended narration. And if you look at the Prahlad story, and just again, which has very rich theology, the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj are famous. Lord Nrsingadev's answer to him, the prayers by the demigods trying to pacify Nrsingadev, those prayers get into very advanced theology. And so the Bhagavatam, the person who can sit down and read the Bhagavatam with relish, it's really not only a devotee, it's kind of a devotee with something going on upstairs. Because, even when Prabhupada was here, he was always complaining to his own disciples, you don't read my books. Some of us read his books, but, a lot of former hippies and former this and former that, they weren't exactly like budding theologians. And so the Bhagavatam really is a book for the serious devotees of the Lord. And if you look at the Mahabharata, it's really the people's book. It's the book for the people. And it tells, what the Bhagavatam tells, that God himself came to this world, walked on the earth, and which is the most important event that could ever possibly happen on a planet or in a universe, that God himself personally comes. And so if people don't accept that Krishna actually came to this world, they're obviously not going to care very much that Lord Chaitanya is Krishna. It's just a myth about a myth. from the point of view of someone that doesn't understand this is all really true. This actually happened. Or take the demigods, for example. I mean, just to give an example of the kind of cultural challenge we face to save this planet. In a sense, what we have to do in our preaching is the opposite of what the Bhagavatam does with the demigods, but for the same reason. At the time the Bhagavatam manifested in this world, based almost practically self-manifested in this world, people really worshiped the demigods in India. People took the demigods very seriously. And if you look at the Rig Veda, the main god in the Rig Veda is Indra, who, by the way, is blonde. But just throw that up. According to the Rig Veda, he's actually like blonde, contrary to much Indian and Neo-Indian ISKCON art. So, so therefore, the Bhagavatam kind of goes out of its way to make it clear, hey, everybody, Indra's not the guy. So the Bhagavatam really takes pains to explain monotheism. And of course, even scholars in the Western world have this mistaken view, which you hear all the time, that from the Middle East you get the three great monotheistic traditions, whereas India provided the world with polytheism, clearly inferior. But actually, the Bhagavatam in various stories powerfully makes this point about monotheism. And so Indra, I mean, if you read the Bhagavatam, unlike the Rig Veda, where Indra is like this really handsome, charismatic guy who's like, you know, it's like you take the Thor movie and kind of put the Thor movie on steroids, you know, and then you get Indra. And so, I mean, Indra's really this interesting, attractive, charismatic, super guy. I mean, he's like, you know, way beyond Marvel Comics. And so, and yet, in the Bhagavatam, to counteract that, Indra is always slipping on banana peels. So, for example, he kills Vishvarupa, the son of Twashta, and then he's given all these curses, and then he has the really great idea to try to destroy Krishna's abode, Vrindavan, you know, really thinking. And so then he's embarrassed, and then he has to come apologize, and even in the story of the Khandava forest, where he tries to burn down, he tries to put out the fire when Krishna's burning the Khandava forest. So Indra is just always kind of at the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the wrong thing. And then Krishna has to rescue him, because in the Vamana story, another powerful monotheistic story, where Indra is defeated by the Asuras, Krishna has to come and rescue him. And even in the eighth canto, the battle between the Devas and the Asuras, and Vishnu has to come again. So that's what the Bhagavatam does to establish monotheism. Ironically, we have to do practically the opposite. Because nowadays, hey, I've heard about that Aussies are pretty heavy drinkers.
The beer, ginger beer.
How near? Question is how near. So,
Yes.
Cheers. Here's mud in your eye. Well, I got my bottle. So, if you think about our situation preaching today, where in the West, it's like, how many Western people believe in Indian demigods? Maybe like 7. It's like, you know, in terms of non-devotees. So, but look at the consequences. If someone in the West or anywhere thinks demigods don't exist, this is obvious mythology. It's all made up. And since the demigods are really interwoven throughout Krishna Lila, how can Krishna Lila be true if this particular set of characters that are always appearing in Krishna Lila don't actually exist? So, therefore, I say, ironically, we have to convince people that the demigods really exist. because it's a package. Otherwise, how will they accept Krishna? So that's just an example of how cultural imperatives change, how the world we live in today is very different. For example, at the time of Lord Chaitanya, at least in Hindu culture, to use that term, the Brahmins completely dominated the culture.
Chacha, it's are you there?
Yeah.
I think there's been some cut. Yeah, I think we're good to go.
You got me now? Probably anti-Krishna West people are trying to sabotage this broadcast. I won't say who I think it is. But just kidding. So, the cultural situation in Australia. So back in Lord Chaitanya's time, if the Brahmins accepted something, it was true for everybody. Basically, people, the Brahmins decided in the religious realm, the spiritual realm, what's true and what's not true. But nowadays, it's not at all like that. Everything's democratic. Nowadays, if the Shudras buy a certain music or go to a certain movie, because there's more Shudras than anybody else in every country in the world, and therefore, in a sense, the Shudras now decide who will become a successful composer, writer, anything. So, there are cultural elites, like these sort of extremely unfortunate people that are modern art critics and modern art and all that. But in general, in terms of popular culture, it's really become very democratic because there's just more low-class people to buy culture. So in so many ways, and we go on and on and on and on to show the ways that our culture is so different than in the past. For example, the famous story where Lord Chaitanya told H.D. Goswami to, give away his Gucci chadar. He had this very fancy chadar, and Lord Chaitanya said, "Hey, you got to get rid of that because why? Because that was the culture." Prabhupada, on the other hand, wore exactly the kind of chadar that Lord Chaitanya told Sanatana Goswami to give up. Prabhupada wore, jewels on his fingers. He wore a Rolex watch. Why? Different world. It's a different world. Especially in India. It's funny because in India, where before no one would take a so-called sadhu seriously unless that sadhu sort of exhibited voluntary poverty, now in India, the more you can flaunt wealth, the more people think, oh, you're a real leader. So we could go on and on. The cultural situation is so different. Now, some people say that Prabhupada made all the adjustments that ever need to be made. The only problem with that is, number one, Prabhupada never said that. So, but, thanks to those who are saying it for him, even though he never said it. And also, anyone that thinks that the world today, whether it's Australia, America, Germany, whatever, that the world today is exactly like it was 50 years ago, really needs to have their head examined. In fact, Prabhupada, and this is just non-controversial, obvious historical analysis, Prabhupada never actually saw the Western world under normal circumstances. For example, I was born in California, I was born in Los Angeles, and in 1966, which is when Prabhupada registered ISKCON, everything started to change. Everything started to change. The culture radically changed around that time, 66, 67, and then around the time, say about 10 years later, when Prabhupada was sort of winding up his earthly pastimes, it changed back. Obviously it didn't go exactly, back the way it was, but, Lord Krishna created this situation really only during the time that Prabhupada was with us, where people were mad after Eastern mysticism. There were so many huge celebrity gurus. There are no celebrity gurus now. I used to go to American university campuses to sell books as a young sannyasi, and on the boards, the event announcement boards, like literally half of it was just celebrity gurus, this guru, that guru, the other guru. Nowadays, you never see that. You never see that now. The world's completely different. So it's like this little historical window opened, Prabhupada walked in, and then it shut. It's over. It's over. And so when people think of India or Indians now, they have very different ideas. Very, very different ideas. And so, so Prabhupada, Krishna created this amazing situation for Prabhupada. I mean, someone may say, well, no, all you need is purity. Really? Well, I don't think Prabhupada became a pure devotee on the boat coming to America. And I don't think Prabhupada became a pure devotee when he landed. I think he was a pure devotee before he ever got on the boat. And yet we all know that in India, it wasn't happening. Same Prabhupada, same pure devotee, same liberated soul. And what happened? Basically nothing. Why? Wrong strategy. But Prabhupada had incredible agility. He was brilliant. And so when he saw it's not working, he shifted gears and tried something else. So if you look throughout Prabhupada's life, especially since he took sannyas and really kind of set out to the mission, can you think of a single time when Prabhupada tried a particular strategy, it wasn't working that well, but he just kept doing the same thing? I can't think of an example of that. So Prabhupada came, and this amazing historical opportunity arose. Krishna sent Prabhupada right into it. He took full advantage of it, and then it ended. And so to say that here we are 50 years later, ISKCON 50, and that nothing has changed, the world's exactly as it was, is really just insanity. It's just madness. Everything is different. Everything is different. Communications are different. Values are different. Morality is different. Attitudes are different. Everything is different. Families are different. Children are different. Music is different. Movies are different. Everything is different. And so to think that we can preach to a world that existed 50 years ago, instead of the world that exists now, that is really what it means not to follow the acharyas. Can any of you think of a single acharya that didn't make relevant adjustments and adaptations? I can't, because people that just did exactly the same thing didn't become acharyas. If you think, for example, of all the modern acharyas, Bhakti Vinod, Bhakti Siddhanta, Prabhupada, they became acharyas because they had the intelligence, the spiritual and material intelligence to understand the world and to adjust to it. And those who didn't adjust didn't become acharyas, and you've never heard of them. So the idea that to follow the acharyas means you never adjust everything is Hare Krishna. Yes, Ajita, the unconquered one.
I want to ask a question in regards to when you make adjustments.
Yes.
It's a matter of going fishing, but you don't get fished. But you don't get pulled in.
Oh, don't get wet. That's
wet.
what Prabhupada said. Go fishing, you don't get wet.
So is that done? Is that done with common sense, or in relation to our realizations, or how does that work?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. First, as I pointed out in some of my completely non-controversial papers, there are three basic things that Prabhupada never wanted us to change, which are our philosophy. I mean, obviously, you can't change our philosophy. Our basic spiritual practice as taught by Prabhupada, sadhana bhakti. And number three, our institutional framework. Prabhupada wanted us to serve in ISKCON. That's why, despite all the challenges, I have chosen not to make a fool of myself and become a wannabe wannabe little Prabhupada or something, and create another institution. Because actually, there's only one person that had the potency to do that, and that was Prabhupada. So, if you don't change our philosophy, and you don't change our spiritual practice, and you serve Prabhupada's institution, where's the real danger? As far as who decides, really, it's really open for everyone to try their best, and whoever succeeds. It's just like when the Gaudiya Math disintegrated, all the different sannyasis tried, and Prabhupada tried, and Krishna showed who was who. So I think if we follow the principles, preserve our teachings, and work in ISKCON, then everyone is free to try and see what happens. For example, in Chapel Hill, there's a movement there, of course, ISKCON community, which had been there for, it would be, I guess, over 30 years. And then we brought Krishna West there, and they made more devotees at the university in a year than they had in 30 years. It's interesting because, and the same thing is happening in other places. It's interesting because, some of the leaders said to me, well, why don't you set an example? Why don't you just show by example? But then when we did, I realized they're not watching. It's interesting that, it's almost like a phantom limb. You know what a phantom limb is, that medical term? It means if someone unfortunately has a limb amputated, like an arm or leg, they still feel it. They feel the pain. They can feel arthritis in it. It can itch. And so it's called a phantom limb because it's amputated, but somehow there's this nerve memory and the person still feels it. And so, so I think to some extent there's a phantom Western Hare Krishna movement. In this sense, I remember when I was young. I mean, obviously I'm still very young, but when I was younger than I am now, Jita, tell everybody how young I am.
She can't understand.
Okay, so I remember when I remember when I was younger, there was this thriving, flourishing Western Hare Krishna movement, and so if you did something, everybody watched you, and the word spread like electricity. And then, okay, I'm going to do it. The point is, no one's watching now. There is no Western Hare Krishna movement that's even watching. In North America, anyway, I mean, you live in Australia. You obviously know about what's going on in your major cities. But in North America, if you go to practically any major city in America, say, or Canada, it's an Indian Hare Krishna movement. And as we know, there are sincere devotees, but we know that Indian culture tends to be very clannish, so that basically Gujaratis preach, not even to Indians, to Gujaratis. And South Indians, if you go to, say, do a program at an American university with some South Indian graduate students who are very sincere and very good devotees, it turns out that all the people who come to the program are South Indians. So if you look at even today, the marriage culture, like, it's like who you can marry and the degree of control parents have over their children, what they major in at the university, who they marry, and what their career is going to be. And in all that, it's still far, far beyond what you find in the West. In fact, the tendency to identify with oneself, not first of all as an individual, but as a member of a community, an extended family or whatever, is actually, and has been for thousands of years, a psychological characteristic of Asia. If you look at, for example, the all-pervading ancestor worship, even among early Buddhist monks who claim there's no soul, but still you've got to save your ancestors even though they don't exist. So, and in Chinese they say the person's last name first because it's that family identity which is more important than the person's name as an individual. And so this tendency toward more group consciousness rather than individual consciousness, I mean, this goes back to 2,500 years or more. When, if you look at the major contacts between East and West in the ancient world, first of all, you had when the Persian Empire was formed by Cyrus the Great around 2,500 years ago. Naturally, the Persian, that's a whole other story, who Cyrus really was. He was actually a Vedic king. But anyway, after Cyrus, you had this large Persian Empire that wanted to swallow up Greece because it was right there. It was right on their border. In fact, the Greek world extended to Western Turkey. That was Greece. And so they had these marathon battles. That's where the word marathon comes from. The Battle of Marathon. It was this incredible battle. And the Greeks defeated them. Then this invasion. And then the next great contact was Alexander the Great. Alexander basically just conquered the Persian Empire. But anyway, what I mean to say is, if you look at these East-West contacts, even 2,500 years ago, people in the East tended to be more group consciousness, dependent on what the group says. The Western people, more individualistic. This goes back 2,500. It goes back as far as recorded history. And so therefore what we find is that it tends to be, there are exceptions and notable exceptions, but it tends to be Western people who are successful preaching to Western people. That tends to be the case. And so so therefore, the point I wanted to make is that, let's say we did something in Krishna West and Chapel Hill. Who's even watching? Who even cares? Because in terms of all the, every major American city, the temples are, almost, many of them almost entirely, devotees from Indian background. I mean, they're wonderful. They're devotees. We love them. It's not that we're better than they are. They're better than us. They're Vaishnavas. But they're not really watching. That's not really on the top of their wish list to make Western devotees and make America Krishna conscious. That's not on the top of their wish list. So they're not really watching. They're not really that. I mean, obviously there are exceptions. I know that. But in general, they're not really that interested. There was one catastrophic example that a senior ISKCON guru that goes to your part of the world told me about, where in one American city, the devotees were invited. In one American city, the devotees, can you hear?
Yeah, you just froze for a while, so you just caught up at 100 miles an hour there, which way?
Oh, really? Yeah, I'm doing that on purpose just to see if you're paying attention. Gurus.
I want to ask another question.
ISKCON gurus can control the internet. Did you want to ask another question?
I want to ask, you gave the example of Newton and Bach before.
Yes.
And you said that they presented according to the culture. Isn't that at the time of Lord Chaitanya, he had enough influence to influence the culture, which then has a similarity with the divine culture? Or was it the other way around? Was it that it was a local culture, or was it that because of his appearance, he influenced the culture in a particular way, which then is somewhat divine, and then was reflecting his appearance at the time, 500 years ago?
Okay. The world dramatically changed when Lord Chaitanya came. So, for example, the age of exploration, the discovery of new continents, which fully brought Europe out of the Dark Ages, new technologies, and the printing press. I mean, that's a whole lecture, but basically, the Western world dramatically was transformed during Lord Chaitanya's time, not least of which was the Protestant Reformation, which broke up the hegemony, the united fanatical Christian front, and actually made possible in the Western world other religions. So all these things happened during Lord Chaitanya's time. So that was your basic question? But the Bhagavatam says, Nato Natya Dharo Jata, that when Krishna comes to this world, he comes like an actor in costume. We know that Lord Chaitanya accepted many external customs which are not eternal just to fit into his culture. For example, Krishna in Vrindavan, he's the child of Nanda and Jashoda. But Lord Chaitanya would only eat in the homes of Brahmins. Why? Because that was a culture back then. He took sannyas. Why? Because that's what you had to do to get people to listen to you. He told Sanatana Goswami to become a mendicant and dress in rags. Why? Because that was the culture then. None of this is the spiritual world. The Bhagavatam says nato, which means an actor, natya dharo, in wearing a costume. So according to the Bhagavatam, when you see Krishna, his external culture, it's an actor wearing a costume to fit into his culture. Not only that, we don't even know exactly what he wore because the Bhagavatam doesn't tell us. We know that he tended to wear yellow clothes. He's called Pitambara, which means yellow clothes, and Balarama's Nilambara, which means blue clothes. So at the same time, what Krishna does, he fits into the culture he's in, and then he gives eternal knowledge within a cultural vehicle that people are comfortable with at the time. And so if you look at Krishna's own actions and the actions of acharyas, if you take the same eternal knowledge, you don't change it, and you put it in a cultural package that people in your time are comfortable with.
And Maharaj, to connect what you were talking about before,
sure.
I was asking, then you're saying that these days, that era of the gurus coming to the West or even in India has closed. And so now, not only here, but in India, they look more up to whoever is financially or corporately or, I don't know in what way, successful as someone to look up to. And then you're saying in the West, also it's not so much the group that you belong to, but the individuals that are successful in some way. I'm just trying to understand in my head then how to connect what you were just saying, answering about Lord Chaitanya fitting into the culture to present absolute truth.
Right.
What does it mean then in terms of what we look up to these days in Western culture or even the Indians?
Right. Okay, good question. The way I put it, culture flows down. Culture is like water. It flows down. It doesn't flow up. And so in sociological terms, there are status cultures, prestige cultures. For example, during the time of Jesus, the prestige language was Greek. That's why the New Testament was not written in the language Jesus spoke, which is Aramaic. It was written in Greek. Why? That was the English of its time. That language had status. If you wanted people to be impressed, you wrote in Greek. So Lord Chaitanya, what he does, if you look at his pastimes, either as Krishna or Chaitanya, he comes to this world and he establishes his teachings in a particular area. It's just like Prabhupada always said, Lord Chaitanya left the rest of the world for us. One time I was walking with Prabhupada in Mayapur. We were alone walking on the roof of his building, and as usual, some people in India, usually the Gaudiya devotees and sannyasis, were criticizing Prabhupada. And this time they were saying that Prabhupada, he flies around in jet planes. Lord Chaitanya didn't do that. So then Prabhupada said to me, should I be a fool and just walk like Lord Chaitanya instead of taking the jet plane? So if someone, this idea that we have to dress like Krishna, why don't you wear a peacock feather? Why don't you go bare-chested? Why don't you, it's absurd. Bhakti Siddhanta didn't dress his sannyasis or himself as sannyasi the way Lord Chaitanya dressed. Why did Bhakti Siddhanta use a Ram Krishna mission dhoti and a Muslim shirt? Why didn't Bhakti Siddhanta have himself and his sannyasis dressed the way Lord Chaitanya did? Look at every ISKCON painting of the 6 Goswamis. Prabhupada told me they are the original Gaudiya Vaishnava sannyasis. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas elsewhere but then with the Goswamis, he established the tradition of Gaudiya Vaishnava sannyas. And we know from the song, Prabhupada once told me in Vrindavan, study that song of the 6 Goswamis, and you'll understand what an ideal sannyas is. And in that song, it said, Kopina Kantashito. They wore kopines and rags. So I want to ask the Jita if he's okay when I come to New Govardhana if I walk around the farm in kopines and rags. Bare chested. And I'll give the argument that the opponents of Krishna West give that we should dress like Krishna. And so since Lord Chaitanya is the nearest incarnation to us and actually started our specific movement, clearly I should dress like Lord Chaitanya and the 6 Goswamis and wear kopine and rags. And I'm sure that will get me in a huge amount of trouble with leaders of the movement. In other words, if I actually dress like Krishna did, I'll get in trouble. And if I don't dress like Krishna did, then I get in trouble. So, anyway, Hare Krishna. You gotta love the Hare Krishna movement. So, any questions?
We were just making fun of some of the woofers dressed down at the farm.
I hope they're closer to the Goswamis than anyone else.
Yeah, you should send me pictures of people. Anyway, I didn't just want to browbeat you all, but maybe I'll just close with this. Because I know you have more important things to do, like eat. And that is, how should I put it? I'm going to try to be nice. I'm going to try to do something different and be nice. Unfortunately, I'm the last active preacher in ISKCON that was personally trained by Prabhupada as a GBC. I don't know of any other members of the GBC who were trained by Prabhupada as Western GBC members. And somehow or other, it's stupid for me to say this, but it's just, I believe it's relevant, so I'll say it anyway. Somehow or other, Prabhupada thought that I was intelligent. Again, I feel stupid saying it, but it's just, he made that famous statement, like, this boy has a transcendental brain. When he probably met my mother in Los Angeles, first thing he told her was, your son is very intelligent. My mother started telling Prabhupada all my test scores in school, which was kind of funny. But, so many times Prabhupada would talk to me, not answering my questions, but he wanted to tell me things. For example, when I went to serve as Prabhupada's secretary in Mayapur in 1976, the month before the festival, he actually never asked me to do any secretarial work. He just wanted to talk to me. And Prabhupada was extremely concerned about the success of his Western mission. In fact, he made it very clear and this is not secret knowledge I received, it's everywhere in the Veda base. Prabhupada made it clear that his entire mission depended on making the movement powerful in the West. Some people said West is mundane, profane, why say Krishna West, it's offensive. These geniuses don't notice that Prabhupada put the word Western in his own pranam mantra. Some people say, why not Krishna North or South? Well, maybe because there is no such thing as Northern culture or Southern culture. Maybe that's the reason. And even if you say there's Eastern culture, it's vanishing very quickly. So Prabhupada put in his own pranam mantra, and he told me, I mean, over and over again, when Prabhupada used to go on his walks, he'd always have me drive in the car with him. He would just tell me over and over and over again that we can only change the world if the movement works in the West. And what he meant by that was making Western people devotees, a powerful Western movement. I remember so many times sitting at Prabhupada's feet when he was having press conferences when he came back to America, and he would point to us and say with the greatest pride and joy, "These are American boys and girls. I did not import them from India." So Prabhupada had a global strategy, and that strategy is collapsing, basically. We're not supposed to say that because it's ISKCON 50. I suppose I should just dive into this orgy of self-congratulation, which is ISKCON 50, but I think I'd rather speak the truth. And that is, we're not really making, New Govardhana is a beautiful project. There's, a couple of really great projects in America. There are, really nice Krishna-conscious projects in the Western world, but they are few and far between. And the movement isn't what it was when Prabhupada was there. So there's no question. Anyone that really understands Prabhupada deeply knows that the most critical, essential task before us is to revive the Western mission. Because if we don't, Prabhupada's global strategy fails, and his own pranam mantra simply becomes untrue. Maybe that doesn't bother some people, but it bothers me a lot. So I'm trying my best. If someone's got a better idea, I swear to God, if someone has a better idea to revive the Western mission, I will happily join you. Come up with a better idea, and I can finally do what I most like to do, which is practice lazy intelligence. Just go to some nice, beautiful place and just write books. So, but the fact is, if you ask the simple question, and by the way, I believe that management is not sacred. I believe that every society on earth that does not allow criticism of management becomes a corrupt, incompetent society. That's just the way it is. So I want to observe Vaishnava etiquette. I fully accept Prabhupada's system. I'm not challenging the system. I'm simply saying that when a government forbids criticism of the management, not attacking people, not committing Vaishnava aparad, but when a government forbids criticism of the government's managerial decisions, the only possible outcome is corruption and incompetence. That's just the way it is on this planet. If you don't like it, go to another planet. So if I ask the simple question, in the face of this historical crisis, because guess what? Within your lifetime, the most senior gurus and spiritual leaders in this movement will not be Western. They will not be Western. And in my view, any chance to really, again, make ISKCON a truly international society that has equally powerful programs in the West as in India, it's over. So if you think it's bad now, wait till there are no senior Western spiritual leaders in ISKCON, which is coming in your lifetime. So if I ask a simple question, what is ISKCON's strategy? What is the plan to restore the Western mission that Prabhupada literally gave his life to build, and which is now just a fragment of what he did? What is ISKCON's plan to restore it? There is no plan. There is no plan. And in fact, in Gaur Purnima time, around that time, in Mayapur next year, they're having what they call the SGGS meeting, which is Sannyasi, Guru, and GBC Sangha. And they kept inviting me to go to this meeting. And I said, well, what am I going to do there? And so I said, well, if you want me to go around, halfway around the world, at least, am I going to lead like maybe like a little discussion group, or am I going to speak for a little while on saving the Western mission? And they said, no, they don't want to talk about it. So from Prabhupada's point of view, anyone that knows Prabhupada, his Western mission has basically collapsed into just like a fragment of what it was. We're not relevant in any Western country in the world, any first world country actually, you can throw in Japan. We're not really relevant, we're not really important. And all the senior leaders of ISKCON are meeting in Mayapur around Gaur Purnima, which is the official time and place Prabhupada designated for discussing important ISKCON issues. And that topic is forbidden. They won't put it even on the agenda. They will not even put it on the agenda. All the big leaders and preachers, and they will not even talk about it. And there is no plan. And when I come up with a plan, which, people may like it or not, but it's the best I could do. So the problem is not that the Western mission has collapsed. The problem is that someone actually says it. The problem is that someone speaks the truth. Despite excellent projects like New Govardhana, which I think is really sort of like one of the bright spots in ISKCON in the West, basically you know what's going on. So, therefore, I'm appealing to everyone. I mean, I realize I'm probably like people are thinking, when's he going to stop? When's he going to leave us alone? But the point is, it's just my duty to Prabhupada. How can I face Prabhupada if I don't try my best to restore his global strategy? I mean, to help do it. I can't do it alone. And so, in the absence of any plan in the Hare Krishna movement to fix this, I've come up with something. And if you got a better plan, great, we'll do your plan. You got a better plan. So, yeah, I had my thrills. I was one of the Fab 11, the first gurus after Prabhupada. And so, I got to be an ISKCON beetle in my youth. And so at this point, I swear to God, I don't really need more followers. I don't want any position. I've had all the positions, guru, sannyasi, GBC chairman, this, that. Bottle washer, actually, when I was new brahmachari, head bottle washer. But I've had all the ISKCON positions. I don't need more followers. I just want to do this for Prabhupada. That's it. And Krishna knows that's the reason I'm doing this. So I think for those who really care about the fate of the world and Prabhupada's honor, we can't just go on for thousands of years chanting a pranam mantra that's not true. So anyway, Australia is a great country, although it is I have to admit, I was kind of disappointed when they didn't re-elect Julia Gillard. But that's okay. I got over it. But Australia is a great country, and Australia could lead a revival of the Western Hare Krishna movement. Any country could. Any country could. So, why not us? Because someone's got to do it. We have to do this for Prabhupada. And we have to have the courage to do it. I don't mean go out of our way to offend other people or cause trouble in ISKCON, but if devotees don't have the courage to stand up for Prabhupada and do this for him, I don't know what's going to happen to this movement. By the way, you may never have heard this before, but history repeats itself. And Lord Chaitanya brought a whole army of Nitya Siddha, eternally liberated devotees, down to this planet. And despite a whole army of great, pure devotees, the movement actually vanished almost for a couple centuries. History repeats itself. It's not automatic that this movement will go on. This movement could vanish for a couple centuries too, at least as an international movement. So, we need to open our eyes. We need to face the historical reality and we need to do what Prabhupada needs us to do. That's my humble message. So, Ajita, I hope I haven't, by saying all this, I hope I'm still welcome in Oz, or maybe not, but...
If you wear the coppins and the thing, I'll pick you up at the airport.
And make sure no one sees me, right?
That's the custom. Malcolm has a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Malcolm.
Maharaj, thank you. In Krishna Village, we have so many young seekers from all over the world coming. They're so open to receive spiritual guidance. It's an honor to have you come here and show us how to guide them, how to shift their hearts, how to turn them to Krishna consciousness in a modern way. So please, we really need you here very soon to show us how to reach these young seekers so they can spread out over the world and also spread Krishna consciousness.
That's very kind of you. That's very kind of you. And I mean, I have a lot of faith in all of you. I think you're intelligent, good devotees. And so, yeah, but I could do my little part. But I think that all of you are really qualified devotees. But sure, I could help a little bit.
When? That's my question. Yeah, when?
Oh, when?
What do we need to do?
Well, Ajita said that I only get like 1 pakora a day. Just kidding. He didn't. He didn't really say that. I'm just finishing up a book now. and hopefully I'll do it in a month or two. And then I really want to go to Oz. It's such a beautiful country, really nice, great people, and whoops. So, not a slave to my cell phone. Not anymore. So, yeah. I mean, Oz, I always thought that Krishna never, in the past, didn't let me go to Oz. He knew I'd never leave. So, it's really a beautiful country. I mean, really nice people, friendly, good people, beautiful weather. It's a beautiful country. I mean, Oz, without question, is one of the best places in the world to live. And there's some really nice people there. And I think there's no better place in the world to present Krishna consciousness. So, in answer to your question, I just have to get this book done, and then I want to come to Australia. As you probably know. Thank you. I already have a visa. I have a renewable 1-year visa for Australia.
Could do your 2nd-year visa here with us.
They say when you're under 31, you can get 2 years, so you're okay.
When I'm
You
what?
just need to
You can get a worker's visa, a holiday, what is it called?
working holiday visa.
Working holiday visa for 2 years if you're under 31. So you're good.
Yes, yeah, of course. I'm glad you. I didn't fake you out with all this cosmetic surgery I did to make myself look older. So yeah, I mean, Australia is just a beautiful country with so many good people, and I really like the Seekers. You know, I know I'll never find another you. You know the musical group? You don't know the Seekers? It's the first Australian group that became like worldwide success in popular music. Anyway, forget that. So, but thank you all very much. It's
Okay,
what's that?
We bring it.
we'll bring the Seekers, you bring you. And then
We'll bring Julia Aguilar.
Yeah. Julia, poor Julia, she got a bad deal. So, but thank you all very much. I really do appreciate it. I really appreciate your kindness and your warm welcome. And Padma, of course, has been doing a lot to help me get to Australia. And
She even said she'll pay for the trip, so she's okay.
yeah, but so I hope to come before too long. So I have to get this book done, and it'll really be a pleasure and honor for me to be able to try to help Australia. So,
On those words.
thank you, Ajita Prabhu. Hey, Ajita, I still get to climb on your back in the water?
Yeah, sure. We're going to Red Lake here. We can do that. I don't know if I can.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It was really a pleasure to see all of you.
Yogesh Acharya.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Not bad, huh?
It was in the stream, no? You stream?
Oh, my God, yes. Hare Krishna.